Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host temporarily on Flagship for the week. David Edgar is currently having some broadband Wi-Fi internet-related issues and is unable to join you this week. So I'm afraid that you're stuck with me. But I've been able to pull in, let's face it, it's a ringer. And we've spoken about one man in Ayrshire who can't get onto the internet and another man who's not long discovered the internet, and that is our very own Andy McGowan. Andy, how is your dial-up modem going? Have you connected your Spectrum ZX80 to it yet?
That's really funny, Cammy. I was lining up a tremendous Saltcoats versus Conan joke there because obviously Edgar's always going on about Saltcoats, and here he is sent back to the dark ages. I hear he's sitting in a house reading a book by candlelight. Is that true?
Yeah, because Davey's probably one of those guys who's such a bone idle, lazy bastard that he doesn't operate the light switches any longer. He just shouts on Alexa to turn the lights on and off and all that. So he probably doesn't know how to work the light switch any longer. So yeah, I can imagine it. I can imagine him just sitting there going a bit feral, you know what I mean? You say he's reading a book, but
Howard Hughes peeing into a jug.
Yeah, exactly.
Living in chocolate.
He's
oh, wait,
become
that's
a
me.
germaphobe and all that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? But I could just see him sitting there, dishevelled, do you know what I mean? Clothes absolutely torn to bits because he hasn't been able to use the watch. Even though his internet doesn't affect that problem, I can just see Edgar really having major issues with it.
So he can't do anything. I mean, he's obviously he can't use a hotspot on a phone or anything like that. Is that beyond him? I'm thinking about using this with my work. Excuse me, I've no internet. I just need to sit here and watch. Oh, I can't watch Sky either. I'll just read a book for 3 weeks. Sorry, that's not going to fly.
But see, if it was anyone else, Andy, they could get away with that. But people who know you know that if your internet wasn't working, and if for whatever reason you didn't have access to a vehicle or the trains, you would walk to your office in Glasgow rather than, suffer the ignominy of having to call in and say, oh, by the way, I can't work today. Do you know what I mean? I don't think you've ever taken a day off sick in your life.
I think I have, Cammy. I nearly died. Anyway, got to talk about football or what? We just got to talk about Edgar's lackey electronics or what?
Well, I suppose we better talk about football, shall we? Right, we're here to talk about the Scotland game. No, we're not really. No, we're not really.
My modem would just shut down any minute now if you started talking about the Scotland game.
I know. Listen, we are midway through the international break, of course. Scotland did play on Saturday night in what I believe was some sort of game that Hampden. And listen, if you're all for it, you're all for it. And, fill your boots. I couldn't really care less. The only thing I had a vested interest in, Andy, was whether or not Finlay Curtis was able to get on. And that was it. That's all I cared about. I couldn't even care what the result was. But irrespective of that, we do have plenty of Rangers news to be able to try and cover. As I'm always glad to have you on, but I do want to get your thoughts on last week. The chairman's update came out aligned with the season ticket prices for renewals. Seems to have been the ticket price up. The season ticket update seems to have went very, very well, which is always great. Never in doubt, if I'm going to be honest. I absolutely appreciate an increase of any nature does put pressure on household bills because your people in the financial world are trying to wreck things with the price of oil and all that now, Andy. That it's even more pressure on the markets, but you don't care. You're just like, shut up and pay it. I don't. But for me and the man in the street, the common man.
Oh, Mr. Cammy, man of the people, exactly, my arse.
When you need to make ends meet, do you know what I mean? And you have to decide between caviar or lobster for dinner that night. The season ticket prices, right? Let's be honest, right? The season ticket prices were a bit of an increase, which I think most people have accepted. There are some grumblings, and I totally understand that because season tickets are only cheap at the best of times, and you're still having to put towards the increase as well. The club did the right thing by maintaining the juvenile prices as well, so we John as well taken care of in that regard. But by and large, the club, it didn't surprise me to see the increase. I think that they've measured it as well as they could have, if I'm being honest, rather than going in for crazy prices. That was my big fear, was the club have put in excess of £30 million towards the playing squad across the course of this season. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting for a minute that has all been money well spent. But I think the club have struck the right note is probably the best way I can say it. And well done to every player who's been able to renew.
So this isn't a normal purchase. This isn't you buying a telly or something that lacks emotion. This is the opposite. This is you purchasing something that, some people need it for their sense of self. I don't think that's any exaggeration. And to lose their season ticket or their family season tickets or whatever would be a horrific wrench. And that goes before we even start talking about quality of football if we're winning anything. This is something beyond a normal consumer decision. And we've got American owners now. I don't know if you've noticed, Cammy, but there was always a kind of, where does this take us? I think when the takeover happened, I kind of said something along the lines of, we're entering unknown. We don't know who Kavanagh is. We don't really know what the 49ers' intentions are. We don't know if they're going to be benevolent. We don't know if they're going to be squeezing us. We didn't really know. And as time goes by, you can only judge them by their actions. And I've been really impressed with Kavanagh. And I think that he's had a very, very tough opening year in terms of decisions, big, massive decisions to be made, things not going to plan and having to change course. I think there's been moments where leadership could have been defined for a long period. I think a lot of the support could have made their mind up for good or bad on some of the moments he's had. And here's another one. The board had to make a decision in terms of season ticket prices. I think the communication was good, albeit they had a false start when they postponed it. Remember, they came out and said we're going to be early. That's not a bad thing, right? I mean, it's not a bad thing that they're going early. I mean, it's not a bad thing that they're coming out and telling us that. They don't need to justify it. They don't need to give away trade secrets and say, here's why. I think reading between the lines, it's simply cash flow, and they want to get things done, and they want to move forward quickly in the transfer market. And whether it happened in March or April or whatever, it didn't really matter to me. But I think that's a good sign that they've got the cognizance to actually say, well, we need to tell the supporter base that we're going to move early. Events overtook it with the Celtic thing, and they postponed it for 2 weeks. But 6.5% in isolation, it's a big jump, above inflation. I was trying to work out what the inflation versus season ticket increase was over the last 10 years. I think it's probably outstripped inflation. But the bottom line is, Cammy, that this sounds harsh, right? And going back to my thing where we're not consumers here, we're buying something that we're emotionally involved in. If we want a successful Rangers and we want to achieve what we need to achieve, and we know the starting point that we've came through, which is behind the 8 ball in 2012, well, even, when the good guys took over 2015, there's been a lot of ground to make up, and we've spoke long and weary about the previous board and what they put in and what we put in, and sometimes it feels as if you've not moved forward, but we've undeniably moved forward. And here we are again, a situation where the football industry is changing all around us, and it's no for the better of Rangers. The coefficient situation is changing, and it's no for the better of Rangers. This is getting harder and harder for Rangers to stand themselves up as a major club and compete at the level that we're used to and that we expect. And it's all about money. And I think most savvy fans have realised that we're not the club we were in 1992, where we were the biggest club in Britain along with Man United. We're not even where we were in 2000, where we were still punching above our weight, albeit it was on money we couldn't afford. We're in a situation now where we the fans are the cash cow, as always, but we've also appears to be that we've got a board and certainly an investor mix that are willing to put their money where their mouth is, just at least for now anyway. So the share issue goes into this, and I think it shouldn't be lost in the MD that season ticket money comes out. Our season ticket announcement comes out at the same time as a commitment to a fairly chunky share issue, going back to another share issue. So over the piece, Cammy, I think, you know me, I'm always sunny side up, and I like to call it as I see it in terms of the finances. We've got a board that are putting their money where their mouth is, and I've often said that the expectations of what we want as fans versus the expectations of what we need to put in as fans, there's a big gap there. There's a big, big gap. And sometimes we take it for granted that there's going to be a rich guy to fill that gap. Just now there is. We'll see where we are in 5 years' time if we're more self-sufficient. There's got to be an end game. There's got to be a payoff for Cavan and his investors. And I hope we start seeing it at least on the pitch in the very near future. Hopefully the next 2 months would be nice. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think, I'll talk about the share issue in just a moment. You're the best person to ask. But for me, what's always interesting with Andy, because I think, there's a few excellent points in there when you talk about Kavanagh's debut season, in terms of what's happened, because you get to roughly, a couple of months shy, but let's say 10 months ago, and the takeover happens. It's obviously been in the works for a good wee while at this point. Everything's kind of done and dusted. We are in about May, kind of June time. And then you hope that structure is there. And then within 7 months, you've had to sack your manager, get another manager in. You've had to go through a recruitment process, which seemed really contrived for what would happen, but I understand as to why it happened. You've then got to get rid of your CEO and your director of football. You've then got to try and replace them as best you possibly can. And on top of this, make what I think is fair to say is concrete assessments of your summer intake, and then look at what can you bring in January. And so I think you're right. I think that he's put his money where his mouth is, but I also think that the actions that he's had to take, if you had to go back to last May and say, by the way, all this is going to happen, he would have looked like, you would have looked at you like you had two heads, and you're like, no, I can't get that wrong. Well, it can, and it did. And for me, this is probably where, and I do want to give them due credit for this, the actions that he took maybe not would have been as quick as a fan would have liked, because I think that we could see the writing on the wall. But sometimes this is the benefit, Andy, of having someone who is a little bit on the periphery of your immediate fan base and your culture and the history of the club and everything else that's happened, because sometimes that might be the cool head that you need. Whereas if we were just so quick fire with it, firstly, I don't think it's a great look anyway, because we've had this carousel of managers over the last number of years. We've really struggled to be able to make it stick. And ultimately, I think that Kavanagh and the group coming in, they knew that this wasn't sustainable to be able to kind of continue to go through this managerial change every kind of 12 to 14 months. So within Russell Martin, they thought they had the right man, and ultimately, as we know now, he's a snake oil salesman, and he says the right things, and he looks pretty, and yes, and I can come in and do X, Y, and Z, and then he gets into the dressing room, and I don't think these players bought into what he was doing, and ultimately, the train came off the tracks. Then the CEO and the director of football then leave at the turn of the year, so now you've got a bigger gap, and he's probably now thinking to himself, well, I'm going to have to play a bigger part in this than I absolutely have to. But one thing in this is where it's going to be the main crux of the matter to all of us as supporters is when we see actual significant player investment coming in. Our criticism was not so much in terms of the amount of money we were spending. It was more what we were spending it on and where the major question marks are around that. Now, what I think will be interesting will be if we are sitting here in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months time, and we are saying that, Yusuf Chermiti has been moved on for big money, which I think personally will happen. Manny Fernandez might move on for big money. And these are players who we brought in at different levels of obviously the amount of money we paid for them, of course. But if you can get these players and then you're going to make a significant profit on it, that is the thing that we have all been talking about that hasn't worked in previous years, which is the successful execution of a player trading model. Mm-hmm. And for the reasons that you've mentioned, and especially the money down south, which kind of appalls me at the best of times, but we are where we are. That is the market that Rangers will have to operate in. It is very much a, buy low, sell high, get as much out of that particular player as you possibly can, gets into the market window and he generates a profit. Brilliant, fantastic. It's not going to happen all the time. I think we're all realists and we acknowledge that. But what I think Kavanagh can understand is that there are definitely opportunities that can be brought into this where he will be able to generate revenue from player transfer sales. But our big question just now is, right, is that sustainable to be able to try and bring us success. And if he could finish off this horrendous debut season with a league title at the end of it, then I think Kavanagh would be able to turn around and go, look, I've weathered the storm, but the lessons here are this can't happen again. It can't be as turbulent as this. We need to be able to have a season where we are we're very stable, but we're still continuing to grow and become more efficient and sharper at what we're doing. This just feels like the road had so many potholes in it that we've had to try and do is corrective action. So he'll want to get to the end of this season probably as much as the rest of us. If we can do that, as I say, with title number 56 in the pocket, then again, obviously we'll all be delighted. And that's why I think it's interesting when we're seeing about the statement that he came out with, because his update he came out obviously primarily was talking around the 6.5% for season ticket increases, and he mentioned obviously the share issue. We will talk about that in just a moment. But like you, I actually thought the update was really solid. What I enjoyed was the fact that he spoke about the board changes. Obviously, Jim Gillespie coming in, Fraser Thornton will be stepping into the ED role, and also made mention of the Old Firm game and everything else that's happened within that as well, which I think was good of him to acknowledge. And this was probably where I knew that, like you, the delay to the announcement was going to come because of what happened at the Old Firm game. Because if we had continued to go ahead with that, piggybacked on the back of the statement coming out for the Old Firm game, it would have just been ripped to shreds by the media. The media would have turned around and said, this is absolutely not the time to be talking about this. So we did the right thing as far as I'm concerned, delaying the announcement. But overall, in terms of where we sit at, I thought his update covered pretty much the key issues that we needed addressed.
I think he's clearly a leader. He's clearly somebody that's operated a very, very high level in terms of corporate, and it shines through. He seems we love a figurehead at Rangers. We've spoken about this in umpteen pods with different people, and Martin Ramsey's dominance. We're always talking about. It's about being a figurehead, and we respond to figureheads when we like them. And it's a strange thing in the Rangers supporters makeup, and it's kind of generational. We've always wanted people who we can look at and respect, and it's part of this. Which some folk would see nonsensical for outside looking in, like wearing the suit and the shoes and all this kind of stuff. There's something in that in terms of the psyche of the Rangers support. And Kavanagh, what I really, really like about him in his first 10 months is he has been observing and absorbing and learning and responding, right? We know, because we had Big Haley at our live show, remember, and you get to talk to him backstage and the rest of it, that Kavanagh was actively reaching out to guys like him, people who had more than an affinity, had a were part of the historical fabric of the club, and he was speaking to them to get their opinion on things. Now, what he was doing with that opinion was he was absorbing it, right? I don't think it was direct feedback as in I agree or I don't agree. He was absorbing it. He was getting it from different people. So he'll be getting different views, but there'll be themes he'll be picking up on. And I think that what you're seeing is he's becoming more intuitive in terms of what it means to be at the top at Rangers, because I don't know if he anticipated taking such a leadership role as he has. I don't know if he anticipated being in Scotland as often as he has. I don't think he anticipated having to do kind of things which could be perceived as performative, but I don't think they are, like before, I was going to say Love Street, Jesus, but St Mirren before the game when he came out, 50 minutes before kickoff, and actually came down with his bodyguard right enough to press the flesh with Rangers fans, get a couple of photos taken. Nothing else, just a gesture, as in the week after that Old Firm debacle, it was a key message. I'm here, I back he's on there in the doghouse, I understand what's happening. He said all that without saying a word. So I think that's a really, really good sign going forward, that we might have an ownership, or certainly Kavanagh, right, that understands that they don't know it all. and that they need to be respectful, and that they need to be tuned in to what the Rangers support are tuned into. And if we've got that, then you've got a chance. You've got a chance of real sustainable success, as opposed to somebody that comes in, wants to do it their way, and doesn't listen, and is dogmatic, and is listening to the wrong people, or listening to people that don't know the club. I don't think we've got that. So, folk goes, yeah, but Andy, you love every board. I only see what I see. And just now, he's recovered from what could have potentially have been fatal moments, which were not all of his doing. Russell Martin being the biggest one. I honestly think if we'd have got, it's too easy to say if we'd go Rule instead of Martin, but if we'd had somebody other than Martin, he was just a cataclysmic appointment on every level, and such a bad fit for the club and the support. You just wonder if we'd change, if we'd get somebody different that summer, where would we be now? No guarantees, but I tell you what, it wouldn't have been as big a recovery operation as what Rule had to deal with. So I'm enthused with what's going on, and the money is proof positive of commitment. Because they don't need to do it, they could be sitting here squeezing the club for everything they can, squeezing the support for everything they can.
I don't think they needed to do it in January, if I'm being honest, because of the way how the season was going at that point. And what I think has been good, about that update as well, is there isn't any, we're not patting ourselves in the back here for being able to try and get into a position where at 5 o'clock this weekend, Andy, we could be top of the league. Now, let's go back only a few short months to the tail end of last year.
And 5 months ago.
You're saying that to yourself, you'd be like, not a chance. Not a chance. However, there wasn't any of that noise that kind of came out the back of that, because one of the things that I think's been interesting is we've been talking about recently, I not even just mean in heart and hand, I just mean, talking to pals and, various different opinions, is that it is that old saying, it's that whole what have you done for me lately? And it's been, fantastic what Danny Rule was able to do when he came in, but you then start looking at the more recent results and you then start to panic a wee bit when you're talking about, Fir Park, Easter Road, Livingston, etc. And it's about being able to get us back on the right course with it. But just because you've been able to get us back into contention doesn't mean that that's going to wash with the Rangers fans, because it's a given for all of us every single season that we'll be involved in some degree of a league challenge. And in Cavan,
but it's not a given, Cammy, because we shouldn't be in this. By rights, 5 months ago, I'm sitting here talking in pods like this saying I'm worried about finishing top 6.
Yeah, but my point is, though, that when we've been able to get that back on track and be able to try and do that, you're no resting your laurels at that point, saying, no. as Danny Rule or Andrew Kavanagh could have come out with and said, well, listen, it's been some hell of a turnaround and we've got to take the credit for that. Actually, everything that's been said at the moment is, we're continuing to push on and we want to be able to get there. My criticism of what I've seen in recent results, and I say recent results over the course of the last, 4-6 weeks, etc., where we have dropped points, isn't necessarily directed at Rule or the running the club. It's because sometimes I think these players don't understand the position that have been able to get themselves in, and I worry about things like body language and do they have the passion and the drive and the commitment to get us over the line, because that is what it's going to take, because this is virtually knockout football from this point on, because drop points now, the panic starts to set in because you don't have enough games left to be able to try and recover it. But, it's very, very possible, as I say, we'll be top of the league on Saturday if we're able to beat Dundee United with, a good level of optimistic encouragement, I think, is the best way to be able to say it. And I think that they will get that at Ibrox as well. And we mentioned the share issue as well. I want to talk about that, about the plan to generate up to £16 million through the issue of new ordinary shares, and being able to complement, I think is probably the best way I can put it, the money that the board have been able to put into it as well. I suppose for me, it was interesting for me to be able to try and see a share issue, because correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's been a wee while since we've had a share issue, is it not?
No, we had one in the 20 million. So there's been This is the second
lot. This is the second one. I couldn't remember. That's obviously went right out of my head.
So we had initial 20 million funding, right? Just post acquisition, there was the 20 million injection.
You're right.
That's
sorry,
a share issue.
I beg your pardon. Yes, you're correct. This is because I just live week on week. But I think it's good in terms of the club being able to say that. I mean, obviously they caveated the season ticket price increase, saying it won't be supporters doing all the heavy lifting. We're going to continue to put that into, and also from shareholder uptake if you wish to be able to do so. It will be interesting to see what the uptake is. I honestly think it. I don't know if it will get to 16 million, but I'd love to be proven wrong.
So it's not a public rights issue in a traditional sense. So it's more a targeted capital raise. So it's a shareholder base.
The existing shareholder base.
Well, no, even that. It's more the new US-led ownership group, right? And so the majority is, and then any existing major shareholders. So this isn't. So I'm a shareholder, right? Minuscule amount of shares. It's not really targeted at me, and I don't think I get the chance. I think I can ask to have the chance, but I think there's a minimum amount you can buy or something like that. 1,000 shares. I might be wrong in that. So this isn't like the Charles Green share issue where they go to the full market and try and reach 60 million. 60 million will be met here, and it's the big guns that are going to do it, right? It'll, in capital terms, it'll dilute all the smaller shareholders, right? But the Rangers model is no longer about you having a share for
fan ownership.
Aye, that's a good point. For fan ownership and monetary value, that's no longer a thing. The whole ownership situation has changed, and Club 1872 have pivoted pretty well as far as I'm concerned, because fan ownership's just not going to happen now. And this is theoretically, this takes it even further away from as it being a concept, but it's a concept that's kind of dead anyway. It's the second amount. So you've had the 20 million initial injection that was put in post acquisition. You've got this, that takes up to 36 million. If memory serves me correct, they bought the club for 51 million or something like that. So you're talking at 80 million, 85 million plus spend already since takeover, if you include the actual buying of the club. And the key thing is that it's kind of explicit that this is for the first team, it's for transfers, it's for football operations, and it's no for what you may have had in the past, which is we spent more than we've got coming in, and we've got a big black hole here we need to fill, and we'll buy shares and then we'll convert it to or give loans and convert it to shares and all this kind of stuff. That's not what this is about. This is about a capital injection, giving us a stronger squad, better on pitch performance, and it's positive. It's really, really positive. And as a football fan, and I obviously have the context of all in the UK because I keep a keen eye on this kind of stuff. You can't take this kind of stuff for granted. You cannot, because there's many a club that are being funded, and I say that in inverted commas, in different ways, which is going to cause them problems down the line. I.e., it could be soft loans that, there's a nod and a wink that they'll never get called in. But as we can see happening at Hibs, the Gordon family are kind of saying, well, we're not going to fund it anymore, or they're either saying that privately and it's getting hinted at publicly. So this isn't that scenario. This is about as positive as you can get. You can't do it time after time after time, but I think it's a kind of signpost for the owners that they'll do what it takes until they can. And what I mean by that is where, financial fair play or whatever it's called now is an impingement on it, because you cannot just fund the club Roman Abramovich style endlessly now. That's not something that can happen. But Kavanagh has spoken in the past, certainly that fan forum I went to, face-to-face fan forum, that there was headroom for this kind of stuff. So the next question is, how does it get invested? Who do we spend it on? And recruitment is, as always, the be-all and end-all. You can have a small amount of money and make it really work for you. You can have a big amount of money and really make an arse of it. It doesn't really matter about the money. It's about how you spend it. And I'm hoping that the January window is a sign of better things in that regard, right? I've got some new where there's a bit of space between the close season and now. I have a bit of sympathy with Elwell, right? And I know that might sound like verboten. You can't say that. He had to deal with what he had to deal with at the time. He went to the market he knew, and there was hit and misses, right? And Rothwell, for example, I thought that was a great sign at the time because I used to watch him for Leeds. Davey Edgar says that's a great sign at the time. Me and him are nodding our heads in sage agreement. You've then looked at Fernandes, you look at Chermiti, you're looking at other players we've signed. Magoma, for example, is a loan, and you're like, they're not going to make it. And then the subtlety of the lesson to Rangers fans is you've got to give people a wee bit of time to breathe into being Rangers players because it's not an easy thing, particularly when they're young and they came for a non-comparable league or team club to Rangers. So, with hindsight, I'm not saying Thelwell was great or he should still have been here. No, the Martin decision was enough. That was a big enough nail in his coffin. But I do have a degree of sympathy of what they had to do in the summer and how they went about it and the rationale for it. And there has been a couple of redemption stories, Chermiti and Fernandes being the two most definite, if you like. So that's where I'm at with the share issue. I think it's a good thing. I've got a couple of notes here. I'm just trying to see if there's anything I missed. Primarily football performance driven capital. It's not balance sheet repair, that kind of stuff. So positive.
Yeah, the interesting one was that, just as you'd kind of mentioned that, I was thinking about that when we were talking about when we were generating cash, either, well, no, it was via share issue or from ownership, it was about recovering, whereas this is about building.
Yes.
And I think, whilst I imagine that most people have turned off now that you've said that you have sympathy for Kevin Thelwell, for anyone who's still listening,
and Patrick Stewart,
yeah, there you go, exactly. Just anyone in the board can do no wrong in Andy McGowan's eyes.
No. That's we can have another pod about that if you want, Patrick Stewart.
But the point is valid because I've said exactly the same thing when we've said about being able to bring players in. It's the one thing that Rangers fans struggle with is patience, and players will settle into it. It was not that long ago where you wouldn't have wanted to see a defensive partnership of Giga and Fernandes. That would have been the last thing you wanted, and now I stay awake at night thinking about them no playing in the team because I can't have John Souttar back into under how he's been playing recently.
Does Melissa know that's why you're lying awake at night?
Well, she doesn't.
I bet he's thinking about X, and you're like, oh,
it's that meme, isn't it? About the lassies lying on one side, going, does he think about other women? And I'm sitting there going, please don't. Hope
Giga's no answered at that.
Exactly. But the point, I mean, listen, if John Souttar comes back for international duty, reborn as modern day Franco Baresi, then I'll be delighted because it's another option to make sure that we've got plenty of cover in there. But right now, as things stand, not so much. But the point that I'm making is that depending on the markets that you shop, I don't think that the markets that you shop in are a clear indicator, because people were talking about the whole, we're going down to the lower English divisions to be able to get.
That's a lot. I know. I agree. It's bullshit.
But if you can ideally unearth a gem, then brilliant. But I mean, you were talking about Joe Rothwell there. I'll take you back even further to Fabio Silva. Do you know what I mean? And a guy who has went for ridiculous amounts of money in the modern day market. But at the same point, you'd think he'd come up here and absolutely walk it. But that Rangers shirt, it weighs heavy. The expectations and the fans are that as soon as you arrive and you step off the plane, all of a sudden you're straight into your kit and you're ready to go. It doesn't work like that all the time. And you will obviously get exceptions to the rule. Of course you will. You'll get players who will come in, they'll settle into it, they'll take it in their stride, and away you go. But I think you need a good few solid months before you can make an effective assessment on a player. And that's something which I think is interesting because as recently as the last few days, Rangers have been linked with Luke Graham for Dundee. I believe that we were looking at him for, I think it's the under-20s that he was playing for Scotland. The Rangers were having a look at him. So already you can start to see and hear some of the future proofing that we're looking to be able to try and do. I despise, I've said this before, Andy, but I despise World Cup transfer windows. Because you're just like that to yourself, is there going to be another Oleg Salenko around the corner? Now I'm showing my age. But the point is valid. I mean, you can look at players who have a brilliant World Cup, and all of a sudden their value goes through the roof. But you're talking about if that was like a normal season, you're talking about a player who's had a really successful 4 weeks, and all of a sudden now he's trebled in value. It's crazy, but that's why I dislike it. What I do want us to be able to do is been able to continue on with this model of there is value out there to be had. And if you are willing to be able to put in that level of research to it, then I think the fans have to be able to give a degree of patience to it. Because I genuinely believe that you don't want to be the guy who says on Twitter, "Oh, by the way, 5 months ago I said this guy was pissing. Now I've been proven right." It doesn't get you any points, right? It doesn't. And ultimately, if you're a true Rangers fan, you'll obviously back whoever comes in and you'll want them to do well. I'm not saying that people can't make their minds up on them. Of course they can. We're all football fans at the end of the day. We all know what we're seeing in front of us. And there are guys within the current Rangers squad, if they leave tomorrow, and I'm looking at you, Rabbi Matondo, but if you're leaving tomorrow, I'll hold the door open for you. It hasn't worked, and we just have to I think probably be a wee bit more open about where we can then say, look, this hasn't worked or that hasn't worked. Because if you take the scenario we're in right now, I think I was talking about this on Extra a week and a bit ago, where I think Danny Rule has got 13 or 14 players that he knows he can rely on right now. And then there's players on the edges of that who he'll have to use, but he knows that he can only use in certain scenarios. Like if you're 2-0 up or you're, turning Aberdeen over or whatever, and then you can bring
I could have came on against Aberdeen.
Well, that's the point, right? But there's no pressure in that. But those are the guys who start against Hibs at Easter Road. Do you know what I
mean? I think it was when we were talking about this, that we are... So we've rebuilt the squad a wee bit, and as I say, we've had a couple of redemption stories that have helped tremendously in terms of how we view the squad in the first 11. But we're still short on the bench, right? And what I mean by that is you are nothing each getting into the last 20 minutes in the next 7 or 8 games, right? 7 games, what we've got left.
And you turn to Bojan Miovski.
Or Barami. Or... Antman's no proven yet. I still think he'll come all right for us. Do you know that? But your Asgard has contributed, but you're worried about his mentality and could he come on and win a game for you? So we're still, I think, 3 or 4 players away from having a right good first 18, and that would be, your players that you're saying, right? They should, generally speaking, be in the first 11 or there or thereabouts. And then you've got a couple of players that have got a bit to prove, or they might be young players. So that's why I don't think we're as far away. And this goes to another point I've kind of made before, but I'm even more bullish in it when I say it now. See if this season doesn't go to plan and we don't win the league and we finish third and we're in the Conference League and we're all doing about it, we stay the course. We stay the course and we keep moving forward, and we don't get, we don't start to flap, and we don't start to call for the manager's head, because I don't think we've got any right to bemoan that, right, given where we were, and focus here. But that's where we were, it doesn't matter. No, of course it matters. You cannot simultaneously say that team 5 months ago is the worst Rangers team, the worst recruitment you've ever seen, and then you get to the business end and be surprised if they choke a wee bit, right? So this is why I still think we've got a really good chance of winning the league. But if it doesn't happen, it'll not be completely a surprise, and it probably isn't something you could have said shouldn't have happened, right? You've got to be consistent. We're better than where we were, but I think if you get another 3 or 4 players of the calibre of Chukwani and Romans in particular, because that's 2 exceptional, well, touching wood here because it's still early, but they look like 2 exceptionally good purchases in a January window for what for us is a lot of money, but in the grand scale of football is not £4 million here or there. So you're going to lose a couple of players this year, need to replace them, and if you can keep the quality in there and add another 3, let's say 3, then I think we're in a far better shape, and you might feel the balance of squad power tip in our favour versus Celtic. and Hearts, right? I'm going to include Hearts because you've got to give them the respect they're due, and I think they're not going to just disappear off a cliff next season. But what we've had in the last, well, for as long as you can think, Celtic have had enough in terms of a squad that sees them through, and they've just got that wee bit more squad power because they've got a bigger wage bill. And generally speaking, if you get a bigger wage bill, you get a better team, you get better quality. So all this kind of investment we're talking about and all this kind of remodelling of the squad is what I see taking us back to the proper level for once. And the proof will be this trading model. If we start selling players for 20, 25 million pound, like Fernandes is quite possible he'll go for that money. Chermiti, if he gets his shooting boots on in the last 7 games, might start to see that kind of bid come in from him.
Andy might win the World Cup. Do you know what I mean?
That would get I'd add another £1 million, wouldn't it?
Yeah, at least that 500,000.
But yeah, in all seriousness, that was the kind of thing Thelwell was saying. He's like, we think he's the kind of player that's got a profile that you could sell for 20 million, and we're like, what? You mental? But now you're like, bicycle kicks in the biggest game of the season, 4 goals against Celtic, playing for Portugal under 21s, all round plays pretty decent. You can see it because you see some of the shite that the Premier League buys. So, I'm hopeful. There's a difference between hope and optimism. Let's be clear, right? Hope can be blind and based on not much at all, whereas optimism is based on what you see, feel, hear. And what I see, feel, and hear is a squad that's getting better. I think we've got a manager that's pragmatic, although you might not always love his football, but I think he's pragmatic and he plays winning football. And we've got a board that's going to back him. And I think, based on January and nothing else, we might have a stable recruitment strategy, and I think we're getting ahead of the game. Because to your point about World Cup transfer, if you're still scouting and you're still making your mind up on a player when he's playing at World Cup, you're fucking too late. You're going to pay over the odds, and there's something awry with your strategy. You're too late, and I think I'm saying a lot. I would like to think some of your deals are further down the line than they ever have been at this stage of the year. And again, Celtic are behind us because they've not even got a manager. Well, as far as I can tell, they've not got a manager, and if they have, they've not announced it. But they've certainly got a director of football and a recruitment side of things. That's where we've kind of been for years. They've been stable. They've been working ahead of time, and we've been catching up because of the relative chaos that we've had in our football department for various reasons. You know, managers leaving and all the rest of it. So maybe the tide is turning.
I hope so. And we've been talking a lot about investments, so just before we wrap up today, if you'd like to continue to invest within Rangers as well, please join us in investing in the Rangers Youth Development Company. They're our Heart and Hands main sponsor from now until the rest of the season. They've got a wide range of products and offer, and profit goes to the Rangers Academy. Recently confirmed a donation of £300,000 and have now provided more than £12.5 million to the club's youth programme. One of their most successful products is Rangers Bricks. I'm sure, like me, a lot of you listening will have a brick, but you can still look to be able to buy some more for other people if you fancy giving them a wee present, a lovely wee gift. Visit rydc.co.uk for full details on all of their products, because they do a fantastic range of things as well. So thank you for that, and thank you for our partnership with RYDC. They do some amazing work. Andy, we'll wrap up for tonight. I think we've got to get a care package sorted out for Edgar. He'll be running low.
I'll go and chap his window and say, David, are you in?
Yeah.
This will be in darkness. Yeah. He'll come like wee Willy Winky to the front door. and by the way, Cammy, I need to commend you in that segue. That was classic. How long did you have that in your hip? Mate, I'm going to talk about investment, and I'm going to our Rangers Youth Development Company.
I've done this long enough now, Andy. It just starts to all become one. Do you know what I mean? It's all just
incredible
rolling professionalism. Do you know what I mean? What can you say? What can you do? But we will talk a lot more about Rangers League chances, as I'll be back with you on Extra on Thursday. We'll talk about the Dundee United game. We'll have a look at what everyone's really focused on at the moment, which is the post-split fixtures, as well as we discuss what may or may not be our course to 56. Thank you to Mike Lee and to Paul Myers. Thank you to you all for listening. For those of you who stayed on past the Kevin Thelwell.
You guys say Kevin Webster there?
Kevin Coronation Street.
You've been watching
Kevin Thelwell name drop by my guest this week, Andy McGowan. Andy, you'll presumably have the Thelwell fan club newsletter to get written up to snow. Is that
tell me this, right? What do you think Kevin Thelwell said when he was sitting watching Sky and Jermaine goes 7 feet in the air and does an overhead kick against Celtic? What do you think he said? I bet he was swearing a wee bit.
I bet he turned around and high-fived Patrick Stewart, who was probably sitting watching on the couch waiting. He was like, see, I told you I was right. I
would have paid good money to see what he said, you know that?
Yeah, probably.
It must be some NDA he's signed, by the way, because see if it was me, I'd have a banner on every motorway. Kevin Thelwell and I signed Yusuf Chermiti. Remember it?
Still don't know if we make the banners up right now, if I'm being honest. But listen, if he scores a hat trick against Dundee United at the weekend, then yeah, all right, I'll get the paint out for it. But yes, thank you so much for coming on, Andy. It's always been great to get your insight, and we've had a wee laugh and a joke as well.
We did, which you're not renowned for.
That's true. If you've ever been unlucky to come to a live show, you'll know that Andy's the funniest one on stage, and that's mostly through what he's wearing at the time. Right, folks, thanks so much for listening. As I say, I'll be back with you on Thursday. We'll look forward to returning to proper football as Rangers return to Ibrox for what I hope is not our last Saturday 3:00 kickoff, but I strongly suspect it will be, Andy. I'm kind of gutted. I hate all these revised times for telly and all the rest of it, but I love a good Saturday 3:00. And if we've top of the league at 5:00, I'll love it even more.
Yep. I don't care. They can play any team win as long as Rangers win the next 7 games.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can play them at 6 a.m. We'll still be there.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. Right, folks, David will be back with you next week, obviously, in Flagship, as we'll return to the normal, proper routine. But thanks to you all for listening, and I will speak to you again on Thursday. See you soon. Bye-bye.